Ever wondered why medieval folks were always depicted with a flagon in hand? Did our ancestors really pound pints from dawn till dusk? Was everyone just wandering around tipsy in the Middle Ages? Number 6, because water could kill you. Picture this, you're living in 14th century London. The Thames River flows nearby, looking refreshingly cool on a hot summer day, but take a sip. Not unless you have a death wish. Medieval water sources were often downright dangerous. Rivers doubled as sewage disposal systems, with everything from human waste to animal carcasses floating downstream. Wells weren't much safer, especially in crowded towns where waste seeped into groundwater. The concept of waterborne diseases wasn't understood yet, but the consequences certainly were. People noticed that drinking from certain water sources made them violently ill. Dysentery, also charmingly known as the bloody flux, was a common and potentially fatal result of drinking contaminated water. It caused severe diarrhea, often with blood, leading to dehydration and sometimes death. While medieval people didn't understand germ theory, they weren't stupid. They observed that beer and wine drinkers often fared better than water drinkers during disease outbreaks. What they didn't know was that the alcohol production process involved boiling and fermentation, which killed many pathogens. The alcohol content itself also helped preserve the drink and prevent harmful microorganisms from flourishing. In many European towns, brewers were considered essential community members, providing a safe alternative to questionable water. Monasteries particularly excelled at brewing, with monks developing sophisticated techniques and recipes that laid the foundation for modern brewing traditions. These religious establishments often provided ale to travelers and the poor as an act of charity and potentially life-saving hospitality. Number 5, liquid bread in your mug. Have you ever heard the phrase liquid bread? That's exactly how medieval folks thought about their ale. Alcohol wasn't just a recreational beverage, it was a critical source of calories and nutrients in a time when food scarcity was a constant concern. The brewing process for medieval ale and beer began with malted barley, which is essentially grain that's been allowed to partially germinate before being dried. This process converts starches into sugars and releases nutrients like B vitamins. When fermented, the resulting ale retained many of these nutrients while providing substantial calories, around 400 to 500 calories per liter. For laborers performing physically demanding work like farming, construction, or blacksmithing, these liquid calories were essential fuel. A typical medieval worker might consume 2 to 3 liters of small beer, a low-alcohol brew, during a workday, providing nearly half their daily caloric needs through drink alone. Pregnant women, nursing mothers, and even children drank weak ale for its nutritional benefits. For the poorest medieval people, whose diets often lacked variety and quantity, ale provided critical nutrition when food was scarce. During winter months when fresh produce was unavailable and stored foods dwindled, a hot spiced ale could provide both warmth and nourishment. Monasteries recognized ale's importance to public health and would distribute it to the poor along with bread. Some historians even suggest that the stability of medieval society partly depended on the steady supply of affordable ale, which helped stave off the worst effects of periodic food shortages and prevented the weakness and illness that pure water might cause. Number 4, small beer, big impact. Think everyone in medieval times was stumbling around drunk, think again. While heavy drinking certainly happened, most everyday consumption was of small beer or small ale brews with an alcohol content as low as 1%, similar to modern kombucha. The brewing process for these lighter beverages was essentially the same as for stronger drinks, but with a crucial difference. Small beer was often made from the second runnings of the mash. After the first, stronger wort had been drawn off for making proper ale, more water was added to the same grain to extract the remaining sugars. This produced a weaker, lighter brew that was considered appropriate for daily consumption by everyone, including children. These low-alcohol beverages were consumed throughout the day, from breakfast to bedtime. Workers in fields, construction sites, and workshops would take breaks to drink small beer, which provided hydration, carbohydrates, and just enough alcohol to kill pathogens without causing intoxication. A medieval farmer might down several quarts throughout a workday and remain perfectly capable of operating a plow or scythe. Small beer also served important social functions. Households would brew batches regularly as part of domestic routine, particularly in rural areas. This task typically fell to women, who were the primary brewers in medieval times before brewing became a commercialized, male-dominated industry. The position of brewster or alewife was a respectable occupation for women, allowing them economic independence in an era when such opportunities were limited. For travelers, small beer provided a safer alternative to drinking unknown water sources along their journey. Inns and taverns served it as a standard beverage, and monasteries offered it to pilgrims and visitors. Ships stocked it for voyages where drinking water would quickly turn stagnant in wooden casks, while small beer remained relatively fresh for longer periods. Number 3, medieval happy hour never ended. The local tavern wasn't just a place to get sloshed, it was the social media platform of the Middle Ages. In an era without newspapers, television, or internet, the alehouse was information central, community support system, and entertainment venue rolled into one. Medieval taverns and alehouses served as community hubs where people from different social classes could mingle. While nobles had their great halls and peasants their humble cottages, the tavern was a relatively democratic space where a wider cross-section of society could gather. Craftsmen, merchants, laborers, clerics, and occasionally even minor nobility might share the same drinking space, facilitating social connections that were otherwise difficult in the strictly hierarchical medieval world. These establishments were hotbeds of news and gossip. Travelers would stop for refreshment and share stories from other regions, spreading information about everything from grain prices to political developments. Local news circulated rapidly, with births, deaths, marriages, and scandals announced and discussed over drinks. In many ways, taverns functioned as the internet of their day, a place where information, both accurate and wildly inaccurate, spread from person to person. Alehouses also served as venues for business transactions. Contracts might be negotiated and sealed with a drink, lending a ritualistic aspect to business dealings. Guild meetings often took place in taverns, where craft secrets could be discussed and professional bonds strengthened through shared drinking. Even local courts sometimes convened in taverns when proper facilities weren't available. Entertainment was another crucial function. Musicians, storytellers, and other performers found ready audiences in taverns. Games like dice, backgammon, and early versions of chess provided recreation. Some establishments became known for particular types of entertainment, drawing crowds accordingly. Perhaps most importantly, drinking establishments served as community safety nets. In an era before welfare systems, taverns often extended credit to regular customers during hard times, essentially functioning as informal banks. Innkeepers might collect donations for community members facing hardship, while drinking companions formed support networks that could be mobilized during personal crises. Number 2, Holy Spirit's sacred brewing. Surprised to learn that some of history's finest brewers wore monks' robes. Religious institutions didn't just tolerate alcohol, they perfected it, brewed it, and sometimes built their entire economies around it. Monasteries across medieval Europe were centers of brewing excellence. With their emphasis on self-sufficiency, religious houses needed to produce their own food and drink. The rule of Saint Benedict, which guided many monastic orders, specifically allowed for a daily ration of wine or ale for monks. The famous saying, "Liquids don't break the fast," originated in these religious communities, allowing monks to consume ale even during periods of fasting from solid foods. Beyond just production for internal consumption, monastery breweries became significant economic enterprises. The Cistercians, Benedictines, and other orders developed sophisticated brewing techniques, experimenting with ingredients and processes that led to higher quality beverages. They kept careful records of recipes and methods, preserving and advancing brewing knowledge when much of Europe was in cultural decline after the fall of Rome. Religious houses often held special brewing rights granted by royal or noble patrons. These privileges allowed them to sell their surplus production, generating income that supported the monastery's charitable works and building projects. Some monasteries became famous for particular styles or qualities of beer, with their reputations spreading far beyond local areas. The religious connection to brewing went beyond mere production. Ale and wine held symbolic importance in Christian tradition. Wine represented the blood of Christ in communion, while ale was associated with hospitality, charity, and community. Offering drink to travelers, pilgrims, and the poor was seen as a sacred duty, embodying Christ's command to provide for those in need. Several saints became associated with brewing and drinking. Saint Arnold or Arnulf of Metz reportedly saved his parishioners from plague by encouraging them to drink beer instead of water. When canonized, he became the patron saint of brewers. Saint Bridget of Kildare was said to miraculously transform bathwater into beer to serve unexpected guests, earning her veneration from both brewers and the hospitality industry. Even brewing equipment gained religious significance. Large brewing cauldrons were sometimes baptized with holy water and given names, reflecting their importance to community survival. Blessing the brewing process became a common practice, with specific prayers recited at different stages to ensure a successful batch. Number 1. Safety in numbers, ABV numbers, that is. Did you know that medieval people felt safer drinking beer than water, not just for health reasons, but because alcohol helped preserve food too? In an era without refrigeration or modern preservatives, alcohol served as one of the few reliable methods to keep consumables from spoiling. Food preservation was a constant challenge in medieval times. Summer's abundance had to somehow last through winter's scarcity. Meat needed to be kept edible during transport or storage. The antiseptic properties of alcohol provided a solution to these problems that medieval people discovered through observation and experience, even without understanding the microbiology involved. Fruits and berries, which would quickly rot in their natural state, could be preserved by soaking them in alcohol. This practice led to the development of cordials and fruit liqueurs that stored seasonal produce in drinkable form. Cherry brandy, blackberry wine, and similar beverages weren't just tasty treats, they were practical methods of food preservation that prevented valuable nutrients from being wasted. Herbs and medicinal plants posed similar storage challenges. By steeping them in alcohol, their beneficial properties could be extracted and preserved. Many medieval medicines were essentially herbal tinctures, plants soaked in alcohol to create shelf-stable remedies. Monasteries particularly excelled at producing these concoctions, developing complex liqueurs that combined dozens of herbs and spices in wines or grain alcohol. Even meat sometimes received alcohol preservation. Fish might be soaked in ale before smoking to enhance preservation, while game was sometimes marinated in wine to both tenderize and help prevent spoilage. The acidity of wine combined with its alcohol content created an environment hostile to many forms of bacteria. Grain preservation presented a different challenge. Stored grain was vulnerable to moisture, rodents, and insects. By converting grain into ale, its nutritional value could be preserved in liquid form that was resistant to many forms of spoilage. While this transformation had to be repeated regularly, as even alcoholic beverages eventually spoiled without modern bottling, it extended the useful life of the harvest. Travel provisions particularly benefited from alcohol's preservative qualities. Journeys in medieval times could take weeks or months, and travelers needed to carry sustenance. Alcoholic beverages remained safer for longer than water or milk, making them practical choices for pilgrimages, trade expeditions, or military campaigns. This preservation function was so important that brewing and winemaking schedules often aligned with agricultural cycles. After grain harvests, brewing activity would intensify to process and preserve the new crop. Following fruit harvests, winemaking and distillation would consume excess produce that couldn't be consumed fresh or stored by other methods. So how much did the average medieval person really drink daily? Was everyone walking around in a perpetual state of tipsiness? Do our modern drinking habits pale in comparison to our ancestors?